Hello, I'm Debbie. Today I'm going to tell you a very personal story about the day my dad died, and I'll never forget it. Okay, it started off, it was late at night at home, and I had just returned home from student parent teacher conferences at my school, which was kindergarten through 12th grade. And I had called my dad at the hospital. He had pneumonia, and I had to use a payphone because there were no cell phones at that time. And I was at the parent teacher conferences at night, and he was sick in the hospital. And so when I called him, I could tell that his breathing was really labored. I could hear his lungs were full of water um, when he was talking, and we didn't get to talk very long. And then, um, so that night I went to sleep, and the next morning, early in the morning, I got a phone call from my mother, and she said, "Debbie, you need to get here as soon as possible. The doctors told us to call everybody together to be with Dad." So I called the airport to see if I could get a ticket to Buffalo. I was living in Colorado in the mountains, and I got a ticket, and it was an hour and a half drive to the airport. So I was the only one in my family that could go because we didn't have enough money for my son and my husband to go to. So I went and got on the plane, and then the whole way there, I was thinking about my dad and how sick he had sounded, and I was hoping that he was going to be all right. And I didn't know what was going to happen. So I got there, got a taxi, went to the hospital, went to his room. When I got there, my mother, my sister, and my sister's husband were there sitting quietly, and they told me that my dad had just gone into a coma just before I got there. So I was so disappointed because I wanted to talk to him, and and I couldn't. So I was there, and if I would have known what I know now, that I've heard that people that are in a coma can sometimes hear what you're saying to them, I would have talked to him then, but I didn't know that. So I just sat there waiting, and then pretty soon my brother and my sister-in-law arrived, and they lived in a different part of Colorado, and they came on another airplane. They arrived, and they were disappointed as well that they couldn't talk with him. So we just sat there for a little bit, and there was a sign that said, "Do not resuscitate." And that was my father's wishes. So we were sitting there, and then all of a sudden, um, the buzzer started going off that my dad had flatlined, and nurses and doctors came running in and started trying to resuscitate him. And we're saying, "No, it says do not resuscitate. He doesn't want that." And they tried, but they weren't able to resuscitate him at all. So then they left, and we knew he had passed away. And so then I was just so emotional. I got on his bed, and I got on his legs, and I started jumping up and down. Um, on my knees, I just started jumping up and down on his body, and I could feel his legs were really skinny like mine. And I was just I was just screaming. I was hysterical. And nobody in my family ever mentioned anything about that ever again. Nobody ever said anything to me about it. It's kind of like I feel like I dreamt it because nobody ever mentioned it again. But I know that I did that. So we stayed there for maybe 20 to 30 minutes more. And then we quietly left. We went back to my mom and dad's house. And as soon as I got there, I went up to his bedroom, my mom and dad's bedroom, and I looked in his dresser drawer, and I found his wallet. And I was not looking for money. What I wanted to see was if he had a picture of me in his wallet. And he did. And I was very happy about that. And my mom came in and she goes, "What are you doing looking in there? Are you looking for money?" And I said, "No, I want to see if he has a picture of me in here." And he does. So I feel happy. So anyway, then I kind of looked through other things in his dresser drawer to see what was important to him. And he had a letter in there from my brother and other things to remind himself about us. And I looked over at his tie rack, and he had, like 60 ties for his work. He was an engineer, and he was very proud of being an engineer, and he always dressed in his suit, and he wore a hat. And whenever he came home with the hat on, the dog would always bark because the dog didn't recognize him with that hat on. It was really crazy. So that night was pretty quiet. And the next morning when we got up, the sun was out. And I was angry at the sun. I said, "How dare you come out when my dad died? How dare you?" And I really was mad. I just couldn't even believe that the sun could be there. But it was. And then that day was also the birthday of my youngest niece. And I believe she just turned 2. And so we still had a little party for her. And so I was blowing up balloons, and I had a balloon in my hand to tie up when the pastor arrived at the door. So I let him in. And then when I went to shake hands with him, I shook hands with the hand where the balloon was, and the balloon flew around the room all over like a maniac. And that kind of brought a little levity to the group. So we had a little birthday for my niece. And then later that day, we went outside and we let off some steam with a snowball fight. And that was pretty much what we did for one of the saddest days of my life. And I'm sure that in your life, if you already haven't had someone pass away that you love, you will. And I hope that you'll have things to remember and things that are very dear to your heart. And I'll keep you in my heart in those times too. Thank you for coming. And please like and share this video. And I have a surprise. There's going to be a part 2 that's really, really unbelievable about supernatural things that happened after my dad died that are just incredible. So stay tuned for part 2. Thank you.